Welcome to Heroic Mission, where we bring you true stories of quiet courage, dignity, and everyday heroes who inspire change without seeking recognition. In a world that often overlooks the humble, we shine a light on those whose actions speak louder than their reputations. Today's story begins with a man most people would never notice, a driver with a quiet soul and a heart full of sacrifice. But when injustice caught up with him, an unexpected person stepped forward. Stay with us as we uncover the moment that shook a room in silence and reminded the world what respect really looks like. Please listen in. In a world where celebrities often seem out of reach, Keanu Reeves has always stood apart, grounded, humble, and remarkably human. Behind the flashing cameras and red carpet events, he lives by a quiet code. Value people, not appearances. For nearly a decade, one man has been by his side through early call times, late-night shoots, and endless road miles. His trusted driver, Miguel. Miguel isn't famous. He doesn't crave the spotlight. He's a quiet soul from San Diego, a man of few words and many sacrifices. Every morning, he leaves a modest apartment where he lives with his wife Camilla and heads to work in crisp, neatly pressed clothes that speak of dignity, not wealth. He's been saving, penny by penny, for years. Not for a house, not for a car, but for the surgery that could save Camilla's life. To Keanu, Miguel isn't just an employee. He's someone who shows up, no matter what, with silent strength and unwavering loyalty. They don't talk much on those long drives, but in the stillness between them lives a rare kind of respect. Unspoken, deep, and earned over time. It's a bond born not of status, but of shared humanity. And soon, it would be tested. It was supposed to be a simple errand, one Miguel had rehearsed in his mind a dozen times. That morning, he walked into the bank carrying an envelope filled with years of hard-earned savings. Every dollar inside represented skipped meals, sleepless nights, and silent prayers for his wife Camilla's recovery. But as he stepped up to the counter, dressed respectfully in his neatly pressed shirt and polished shoes, he was met not with courtesy, but with quiet suspicion. The teller, Bryce, barely looked him in the eye before questioning the legitimacy of the cash. His tone was sharp, cold, laced with something Miguel had felt his entire life but hoped he'd left behind. Judgment. A chauffeur with this much money? Bryce murmured under his breath, not realizing how loud cruelty can be when it's cloaked in condescension. A line formed behind Miguel. People stared, some smirked, no one stepped in. His voice trembled as he tried to explain, but it didn't matter. In that sterile room filled with artificial lighting and empty smiles, Miguel was no longer a husband or a man trying to save his wife. He was just a stereotype in someone else's eyes, and the pain of that would follow him long after he left. The Los Angeles sun was already climbing high when Miguel pulled the sleek black car to a stop outside Keanu's building. He sat behind the wheel a few moments longer than usual, staring blankly through the windshield. His fingers drummed the steering wheel, not from impatience, but from the aching pressure building in his chest. Moments earlier, he'd left the bank with his dignity in tatters, clutching the very envelope he had walked in with, now feeling heavier than ever. The humiliation clung to him like smog. His face burned from the memory of whispered chuckles, the stiff, narrowed eyes of a teller who saw his clothes but not his worth. Still, Miguel did what he always did. He showed up, because that's what men like him do. You bury the ache, straighten your spine, and keep moving forward. At 9:02 a.m., Keanu stepped out. He wore jeans, a simple black t-shirt, and sunglasses, unassuming, just like always. He offered his usual warm good morning, but something in Miguel's voice when he replied gave him pause. It lacked the usual steadiness, the quiet confidence of a man who took pride in his work. Keanu slid into the back seat, but instead of settling into silence like he normally would, he noticed the rear-view mirror reflected more than just the road. It showed red-rimmed eyes, a clenched jaw, and hands gripping the wheel just a little too tightly. They drove in silence for a while, the streets of LA bustling with life outside. But inside the car, it was a different world, thick with unspoken words. Keanu leaned slightly forward, his voice gentle. "You okay, Miguel?" Miguel nodded quickly. "Yes, sir, just a headache." But Keanu wasn't convinced. His instincts, honed from years of observing human behavior both on and off screen, told him the pain here wasn't physical. "You've driven me for almost 10 years, Keanu said, "and not once have you brought me your troubles. So if today's the day that changes..." "I'm listening." The words hit Miguel like a soft hand on the shoulder, unexpected, kind, and exactly what he needed. At the next red light, he finally spoke. He told Keanu everything. The bank, the insult, the feeling of being judged as less than. His voice trembled, not from fear, but from the heartbreak of being unseen when he needed to be acknowledged the most. And Keanu? He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix it with platitudes. He listened. The light turned green, the car rolled forward, but something else had shifted in that moment. Not just between driver and passenger, but between two men, both shaped by struggles others rarely see. In that quiet cabin, Keanu made a decision. He wouldn't let this pass like some fleeting news story. This wasn't about money. It was about dignity, and if there was one thing Keanu Reeves had learned in a life of fame and loss, it was that real power is standing up, quietly but firmly, for those the world tries to overlook. The next morning, Miguel rose before dawn like he always did. He shaved, put on his cleanest white shirt, laced his polished black shoes, and ran a cloth over the hood of the car, his ritual of quiet pride. Nothing seemed different on the outside, but deep down, a storm of uncertainty churned beneath his calm exterior. He didn't know what Keanu was thinking. The ride home the day before had ended in silence. Not cold, but loaded. He had shared a wound, and now part of him feared he had crossed an invisible line. So when Keanu climbed into the back seat, Miguel's voice was steady but careful. "Good morning, sir." Keanu returned the greeting with a soft nod, then added, "We're making a quick stop before the meeting." Miguel glanced in the rearview mirror. "Where to?" he asked. Keanu's reply was simple, but it hit like thunder. The bank. Miguel's hands paused mid-adjustment. His stomach turned slightly, his heart stuttering in surprise. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The car started moving, but his mind raced. He wasn't sure if he should be afraid, grateful, or both. As they cruised through the heart of the city, Keanu leaned forward, voice lower now, almost confessional. "You know, when I was a kid, we didn't have much," he began. "My mom worked 3 jobs. I used to help her count coins just to cover rent. I remember people looking at us like we didn't belong, like we were out of place just for existing." His voice held no anger, just memory, worn soft by time. "And when my sister passed," he continued, "you showed up every day, didn't talk, didn't ask questions, just drove, opened the door, waited. You helped me get through something I couldn't talk about." Miguel didn't know what to say. No one had ever said anything like that to him before, especially not someone the world treated like a legend. But Keanu wasn't trying to impress. He was trying to connect, to level the field between movie star and man behind the wheel. When they arrived at the bank, Miguel stayed seated, hands gripping the steering wheel. Keanu stepped out, calm and steady. As soon as he entered, the energy inside shifted. Heads turned, phones lifted, whispers floated like smoke. Keanu Reeves had just walked into their quiet world, and he wasn't here for an autograph. He approached the counter with poise and requested one name: Bryce. And when the teller came out, stunned into stiffness, Keanu didn't raise his voice. He simply asked a question that cut deeper than any public outburst ever could. "Would you have treated a man in a suit the same way you treated the man who stood here yesterday with that envelope?" The words echoed through the marble lobby like a verdict. Eyes widened, silence fell, and Miguel, watching from behind the glass doors, knew something powerful was happening. For the first time, someone with a platform wasn't using it for themselves, but to lift someone the world had overlooked. And that kind of silence? It didn't need applause, it needed to be remembered. Later that week, as the sun dipped low over the quiet neighborhoods of San Diego, Miguel heard a soft knock on his apartment door. He wasn't expecting anyone. Camila was resting in the other room, her breathing finally calm, the air inside their modest home still tinged with the scent of chamomile tea and fresh bread. When Miguel opened the door, he froze, Standing there, shoulders tense and eyes uncertain, was Bryce, the teller from the bank. But this wasn't the smug man from days ago. Gone was the ironed tie and rehearsed arrogance. In its place stood someone visibly changed, awkward, nervous, holding a plain white envelope with trembling hands. "What are you doing here?" Miguel asked, not with anger but with the kind of weariness that comes after being made small. Bryce's voice cracked. "I came to say something I should have said when I had the chance." He extended the envelope. "I couldn't say it right at the time, so I wrote it." Miguel didn't move. Not yet. Forgiveness wasn't something you handed over at the door. But eventually he reached out and took the envelope, opening it slowly. Inside was a handwritten letter, carefully penned, neat, not rushed. As Miguel read the opening lines, his breath caught. "Ramon, I humiliated you, and I've thought about it every day since. My father was a chauffeur. He died on the job when I was 13. I spent most of my life resenting him for always being gone, for working long hours and missing birthdays. I didn't understand the sacrifices until I saw you, and I hated myself for becoming the kind of man who would have humiliated my own father." Miguel's eyes stung. He looked up at Bryce, who stepped back, hands raised, as if unsure whether he should even be standing there. "I saw the video online," Bryce admitted. "I didn't feel attacked. I felt exposed. I saw myself, really saw myself, and I didn't like what I had become." Miguel stared at him for a long moment, the kind of silence that isn't empty but heavy with memory. Then, without a word, he stepped aside and opened the door wider. "Come in," he said. Bryce blinked, surprised. "Are you sure?" Miguel gave a small nod. "Maybe it's time I see you now." They sat at the small kitchen table. Miguel poured 2 cups of tea, and for the first time he told his story. Not just the facts, but the heart of it. He spoke of growing up in a dusty village in Mexico, of crossing the border with nothing but hope, of meeting Camilla and raising a daughter with more love than money. He told Bryce how he had once slept in his car so his wife could have the only bed, how he learned English by listening to the radio while driving rich strangers across the city, and how every penny he saved came with its own little sacrifice. And Bryce, he didn't interrupt, he didn't defend, he listened, really listened. When Miguel finally stopped speaking, the silence between them was sacred. Bryce swallowed hard. "I judged you," he said, voice low, "because I never made peace with who my father was. I never let myself believe men like him, like you, could be anything but shadows in someone else's story." Miguel looked at him, really looked, and something softened in his chest. Not because he forgot, but because he understood. "Do better," Miguel said quietly. "That's all I ask." And Bryce, tears barely held back, nodded. "I will." In the weeks that followed, something unexpected began to shift. Not just in the lives of Miguel and Bryce, but within the walls of the very bank where it all began. What had started as a quiet moment of dignity, courage, and confrontation, captured on a few shaky phone videos, spread with stunning clarity across social media. People weren't reacting because it was Keanu Reeves. They were reacting because it was no headlines, no PR spin, just a quiet man standing up for another quiet man. Just truth laid bare. The bank's leadership couldn't ignore it. At first there were murmurs of damage control, crisis meetings, reputational assessments, but something in the tone of the public's response made them pause. It wasn't outrage for outrage's sake. It was a deep hunger for change, for empathy, for someone to finally see the invisible laborers who hold up society without asking for applause. Keanu had never spoken to the media. When asked for a statement, he simply replied, "This isn't a story for entertainment, it's a story for reflection." And that reflection began in earnest. The bank's board of directors approved the launch of a new initiative, Empathy in Practice, a mandatory training program for all employees, created in collaboration with local community leaders, psychologists, and real people like Miguel. It wasn't a slideshow, it wasn't a handbook, it was a mirror, one that asked, who do we see when we look at someone across the counter? A balance sheet, a risk profile, or a person with a story worth listening to? Miguel had never seen himself as a public speaker. He wasn't the type to stand in front of a crowd, but when the organizers approached him, he didn't hesitate. "If my story can help someone else be seen," he said, "use it." And so, on a chilly Wednesday morning in a break room transformed into a humble auditorium with rows of folding chairs, Miguel stood in front of nearly 50 employees, most of whom had never spoken to a chauffeur, much less heard one speak from the heart. He didn't talk like an activist. He didn't need to. He just told the truth. He spoke about the early mornings, the tired nights, the quiet sacrifices that don't show up in resumes or LinkedIn profiles. He shared what it felt like to be doubted before you even opened your mouth. He described the shame of being humiliated not for something he did, but for who someone assumed he was. And then he spoke about Bryce, not with anger, but with grace. About how people can change when they choose to listen. How redemption isn't about erasing mistakes, but facing them, owning them, and deciding to be better. And in the back row, sitting straight, eyes glistening, was Bryce. He had volunteered to attend every session, not as a punishment, but as a commitment. He stood when Miguel finished, not to speak, but to offer a simple applause that broke the silence and was followed by everyone in the room. No one needed to be told what had happened. They felt it. It was real. Outside the building, Keanu waited in his usual quiet way, baseball cap low, sunglasses on. He hadn't come to be seen. He just wanted to know Miguel was okay. They didn't speak long. They never needed to. But before he turned to leave, Keanu looked at him and said, "What you did in there? That's bigger than anything I've ever done on screen." Over the next few months, the program grew. Stories were collected. Conversations were opened. A culture that had once thrived on routine and formality was now learning to pause and ask, "Who is this person in front of me? And what would happen if I saw them fully? Before I judged them." Miguel continued to drive for Keanu. They still didn't talk much, but every so often, during a red light or a quiet stretch of road, Keanu would look up from the back seat and simply say, "Thank you." And Miguel would nod, because he understood what that really meant. He wasn't invisible anymore. Not because of a viral video, not because of fame by association, but because someone finally looked past the surface and chose to see the soul of the man behind the wheel. Months passed, and the noise faded, just like it always does. The headlines drifted away, the comments stopped flooding in, but what stayed, what quietly bloomed in the silence, was something far more powerful: healing. For Miguel, life didn't become perfect, it became real again. Camila's surgery was successful. Her laughter returned, first soft, then brighter with each passing day. The shadows that once lingered in their small apartment slowly lifted. Their daughter Lucia, once too shy to dream beyond survival, walked across the stage of her nursing school graduation in a simple white dress. Miguel and Camila sat in the front row, holding hands, dressed modestly but proud. They didn't need a spotlight. They were already standing in the light of their own journey. As Lucia stepped forward to receive her diploma, her eyes searched the crowd, and there, tucked in the last row, half hidden behind a baseball cap and dark glasses, sat Keanu Reeves. No entourage, no cameras, just a quiet presence. When her eyes met his, he gave a simple nod, as if to say, "I see you. You did it." She smiled through tears, and before the applause had even settled, Keanu slipped out the side door and disappeared into the city like he always did, gracefully, Outside, under the shade of a jacaranda tree in full bloom, Miguel waited. The air smelled of spring, of new chances. Keanu approached. No grand speech, just a soft embrace between two men who had walked through fire, not as celebrity and chauffeur, but as equals. Keanu leaned in and whispered, "Sometimes a quiet kindness changes more in this world than any scene I'll ever shoot." Miguel didn't reply. He just nodded, eyes full, heart full, and in that stillness they both knew. This was no longer just about one humiliating moment in a bank. It was about what happened after the moment. What we choose to do with pain, who we choose to become when no one's watching. Back at home, Lucia placed her diploma on the wall beside an old photo of her parents on their wedding day and a crayon drawing she made in kindergarten that simply read, "Daddy is my hero." Miguel saw it when he walked in, and he smiled. Not because he had done something grand, but because he had stayed gentle in a world that often demands we harden. He had been a good man when no one was clapping. That, in the end, was what made all the difference. And maybe that's the lesson we all need. Not every hero wears a cape. Some wear scuffed shoes and drive quietly through the streets of a city that doesn't see them. Some never raise their voice, but when they do speak, they change everything. Miguel never wanted to be famous. He only wanted to be heard, and through the quiet strength of friendship, empathy, and a single moment of unexpected justice, he was. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect, made you feel, or simply reminded you of the quiet heroes in your own life, we invite you to subscribe to our channel, Heroic Mission. We believe that the world doesn't just need more headlines, it needs more heart. And every story we tell is a tribute to the unseen, the unheard, and the unbelievably brave. Join us as we continue to uncover real stories of real people, stories that remind us all that dignity, kindness, and courage don't need to be loud to be life-changing. Because sometimes, the ones who whisper are the ones who shake the world the most.